We often think small talk is easy, something almost effortless. But in reality, it's where many people feel the most pressure.
Exactly. You might know the language, you might have the words, but in those simple moments, like standing in a lift or waiting in line, your mind just goes blank.
What's interesting is how natural it looks when other people do it. Just a few casual words about the weather or something around them.
But when it's your turn, even the simplest sentence can feel surprisingly difficult.
Maybe because small talk isn't really small, it's where connection quietly begins. I think part of the difficulty comes from how fast everything happens. There's no pause, no time to prepare, just you and that moment.
Yes. And because it seems so simple, people expect themselves to be naturally good at it.
And when they're not, they start judging themselves almost instantly.
So it's no longer just a conversation, it becomes pressure, self-awareness, and that uncomfortable silence all at once.
Especially in another language, where you're not only thinking what to say, but also how to say it.
Exactly. And all of that turns a small moment into something much heavier than it really is.
Maybe the real problem isn't small talk itself, but how we think about it.
I think so too. We often treat it like a test, something we need to perform well in.
Yes, as if every sentence has to be correct, interesting, even impressive.
But that mindset creates pressure before the conversation even begins.
Exactly. And once you feel that pressure, even simple words become harder to
What if we saw small talk differently, not as a performance, but as a shared moment?
That changes everything. Because then the goal is no longer to sound perfect.
It's simply to make the moment feel easier for yourself and for the other person.
And when you stop trying to be impressive, you naturally become more relaxed.
Which is often when your words come more easily.
Maybe small talk becomes easier the moment you stop treating it like something you have to prove.
And start treating it like something you're allowed to experience.
So, when it comes to starting a conversation, it doesn't have to be complicated.
Not at all. In fact, the easiest way is to begin with what's already there.
You mean the situation around you?
Exactly. The weather, the place. The moment you're both in something simple and shared,
That takes away a lot of pressure. You're not inventing anything, just noticing.
and that's what makes it feel natural. A simple comment can be enough to open the door.
I guess the goal isn't to be clever, but to be real.
Yes, because people don't respond to perfect lines. They respond to something human.
Starting a conversation is one thing, but keeping it going is where many people feel unsure.
That's true. And I think the key here is actually quite simple. Be curious.
Curious about the other person, not just about what to say next.
Exactly. Because good conversation isn't about performing, it's about responding.
So instead of thinking ahead too much, you stay with what the other person just said.
Yes. And you build on it. If they share something small, you follow it with a question or a comment.
Like giving the conversation a little more space to grow.
Right. It's like a rhythm you listen. Then gently give something back.
And it doesn't have to be anything big. Just one simple follow-up can keep things moving.
That's what makes it feel natural. You're not jumping from topic to topic, You're staying connected to the moment.
I guess that's also how people feel heard.
Exactly. And feeling heard is what makes a conversation comfortable.
So, in a way, keeping a conversation going isn't about talking more.
It's about paying attention more.
I think the kind of questions we ask can really shape the whole conversation.
Definitely. Sometimes a conversation doesn't stop because people aren't interested. It stops because the question was too limited.
You mean questions that don't give the other person much to say.
Exactly. Questions like, "Did you have a good weekend?" can end very quickly with just yes or no.
And then the conversation just drops.
Right. That's why open questions work better. Questions that begin with what, how, or why give people more space to respond.
It's like you're inviting them to share more, not just answer.
Yes. And that invitation makes the conversation feel more alive.
But I think it's not just about the structure of the question.
I agree. It's also about intention. You have to genuinely care about the answer.
Because people can feel the difference between real curiosity and just asking out of habit.
Exactly. A genuine question creates warmth, while a forced one can feel empty.
So, a good question is both open and sincere.
And when you ask that way, the conversation doesn't feel like effort. It feels like connection.
Of course, not every conversation flows smoothly. Sometimes things just get awkward.
Yes. And often, for no clear reason, one moment, everything feels fine. And the next, there's a strange silence.
I think that's the moment many people start to panic.
Exactly. They feel like they need to fix it immediately. Or say something perfect to save the situation.
But maybe the first thing to remember is you don't have to panic.
Right. An awkward moment is not a failure. It's just part of real conversation.
And sometimes, it's not even about you. The other person might be tired, distracted, or just not very talkative.
That's an important point. Not every silence needs to be filled.
So instead of forcing something, it can help to stay calm, smile, and keep things light.
Or even say something simple and honest. Just to move the moment forward.
I guess accepting the awkwardness makes it less powerful.
Exactly. When you stop fearing it, it loses its control over you.
And maybe that's what makes you more confident, not avoiding awkward moments, but being okay with them. Another moment that makes people nervous is when they hear something they don't understand.
Yes. Just one unfamiliar word can suddenly make the whole conversation feel confusing.
And then your mind starts racing. Should I pretend I understand? Or should I ask?
I think asking is always the better choice.
Even if it feels a bit uncomfortable.
Especially then, because asking shows that you're engaged and willing to understand.
That's true. And most people are actually happy to explain.
Exactly. A simple sorry. What does that mean can keep the conversation clear and honest?
I guess pretending only makes things harder later.
It does. You might miss more information. And the conversation becomes even more stressful.
So in a way, asking is not a weakness. It's a communication skill.
Yes. And a very important one. Because good communication isn't about knowing every word.
It's about knowing how to keep the connection going, even when things are not perfect. We've talked about starting and keeping a conversation going. But ending it well is just as important.
That's true. And surprisingly, many people find this part a bit uncomfortable.
Yes, sometimes they don't know how to leave. So the conversation just lingers.
And that can make the moment feel a little awkward again.
So having a simple, polite way to end things really helps.
Definitely. Something like, "It was really nice talking to you, but I should get going," feels both warm and respectful.
It gives a clear signal without making the other person feel dismissed.
Exactly. And if the conversation went well, you can still end it on a positive note.
I guess a good ending is about timing as much as words,
Yes, knowing when to leave and doing it kindly.
because the way you end a conversation is often what people remember.
And a thoughtful ending can leave the whole interaction feeling complete and comfortable.
So, after everything we've talked about, small talk doesn't seem as complicated as it first felt.
I agree. It's not about being perfect or saying something impressive.
It's more about how you show up in that moment.
Yes, being present, being open, and being willing to connect, even in a small way.
And maybe having a little courage to begin, even if it feels awkward at first.
Because that first step is often the hardest, but also the most important.
Then from there, it becomes about listening, responding, and staying curious.
Not trying to control the conversation, just allowing it to grow naturally.
I like that. It takes the pressure away and makes everything feel lighter.
Exactly. And when you stop trying to be perfect, you become easier to talk to.
So in the end, small talk is not really about talking a lot.
It's about creating a small moment of comfort for yourself and for someone else.
And sometimes, that small moment can turn into something more meaningful.
Which is why small talk, in its own quiet way, really matters.
Before we finish, let's take a moment to go back through some useful words from today's conversation.
Yes, because understanding the ideas is important, but having the right words makes it easier to use them.
Let's start with at ease. When you feel at ease, you feel relaxed and comfortable.
And that's exactly the feeling we want in small talk. Not tense, not pressured.
Another useful phrase is put someone at ease.
Which means helping another person feel more relaxed. Often, through your tone or attitude.
Then we have approachable. Someone who is approachable feels easy to talk to.
It's not about what you say, but how you make others feel.
Strike up a conversation is also a great phrase.
Yes? It simply means to start talking to someone in a natural, friendly way.
And when we talked about keeping conversations going, we mentioned follow up.
That means asking more about something the other person has already said.
We also used genuine, which means real and sincere.
Because people can always feel when your interest is genuine.
So these words are not just vocabulary, they reflect how good conversations actually work.
And the more you understand them, the more natural your communication becomes.
So if small talk has ever felt difficult for you, that's completely okay.
Yes. It's something everyone learns, step by step. Not something you have to get right immediately.
Just start small. Stay open. And don't be too hard on yourself.
Because the more you practice, the more natural it will feel over time.
And remember, it's not about perfect English. It's about real connection.
Exactly. So take your time, keep showing up, and let your confidence grow little by little.
Thanks for being here with us today.
And we'll see you again in the next conversation.